right. Like to call the meeting to order. Let's start with roll call. Commissioners present. I'm Don Griffin, Chair.
Eric Sandweiss.
David Walter.
Cindy Canarney.
Sue Wanzer from the School Corporation.
Staff present.
Alex Crowley.
Christina Finley, Hand Department.
Larry Allen Legal.
Okay. Next, we'll have reading of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes for February the 3rd, 2020, and for the what is that?
Executive session.
The executive session on February 7th, 2020.
I'll move that we adopt those minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. Next, we'll have examination of claims. Is there a motion to approve the claims register for February the 7th, 2020?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None. The motion carries. Examination of payroll registers. Is there a motion to approve the payroll register for January 31st, 2020?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None. The motion carries. Report of officers and committees. Is there a director's report?
No.
Is there a legal report?
No, but I'm available to answer questions.
Any questions?
Nope.
Is there a treasurer's report? No, there is no
Also
treasurer
no, but
today.
I'm also here to answer.
Okay, you're going to do both.
Sure.
All right. Is there a CTP update report?
Very briefly, the only thing that I want to bring up is if you recall, the kiln was brought to you in a previous meeting. Since that time, they've had a preliminary presentation, unofficial, sort of I don't remember the exact term is, to the Historic Preservation Commission. Their formal presentation, their first one will be in a couple of weeks, but they did do a preliminary just to get a feel for what some of the issues might be. Went reasonably well. I think there will be some changes, but it's an RDC asset, so we'll keep tracking that for you and let you know how it progresses. We're pretty excited.
Thank you. Any more questions?
And when will their formal presentation be? Do you know that?
This next one, so that's February 27th.
27th.
And then if it takes another one after that, then it would be the one 2 weeks later. So it's every 2 weeks on Thursday afternoons at 5.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you all for your reports. Next, we'll start with new business. So let's start with the resolution 20-09, amended project review for IU Health Bloomington site. Is there anyone present that wants or needs to speak briefly to this resolution?
I'll start, and then Larry will clean up after me here because I'll probably mess it all up. We, if you recall, had actually a couple of different preceding project review forms. And what we've done here, so the one immediately prior had already listed the ULI detail. It also had the appraisals and the project agreement with IU Health for the $6.5 million purchase. And what we've, and also due diligence and environmental work. What we wanted to do was reflect in this one two things. One is you'll note that it goes up from what was around 680,000 or so, 6.8 million to 10 million. And the reason for that significant increase is two things. First, we are getting very close, and by the next meeting, you all should have in front of you an agreement for a master planning partner to help the master planning process for the hospital site. So the line item here for master planner of $500,000 is really to hold for that agreement, which should be forthcoming here within a couple of weeks. That's the first thing. In addition to that, we wanted to make sure that this reflected and you were aware of the fact that there would be likely not insignificant amount of spending on the infrastructure for the hospital site. So what kind of rounds out to the $10 million estimate is really the difference. That difference is reflective of what we think will be investments that the RDC could make into the infrastructure for the hospital site when the time comes. So detailed here is a $500,000 line for the master planning function. Not to say that that's exactly the amount, but just to capture what will be the amount. And then beyond that is really an anticipation of investments in the infrastructure.
So the $10 million number and the $500,000 number are just placeholders? to be
Yes.
further updated as information becomes available and confirmed.
You will get an agreement with a very specific amount that will replace the $500,000. And then similarly, when the time comes that there's a plan for infrastructure investments, that will, the remainder will be offset by that more specific amount.
We should always note for the record that this is not approval of funds, so it's not an approval of the $10 million. Those have to be approved in the specific amounts.
So this is a general assent to the direction outlined by Alex?
That's correct.
And I take it from what you're saying that you're in negotiations with the selected vendor who will become the master planner?
That's correct. So there's been a process whereby a much larger group was brought down to a relatively smaller group, and then some significant interviewing of the semifinalists, if you will. That process ended several weeks ago, and then right now we're kind of trying to lock in that final recommendation to you, in fact, because it'll come to you in the form of an agreement, which is both the recommendation and the amounts to be spent on that recommendation.
And at that time, if it's necessary to increase above $500,000, you'll inform us appropriately, but you're presuming it's going to come in below that level.
That's correct.
Okay.
Alex, can you speak to any surprises or unexpected changes in the two areas that you just outlined, the cost of the master planner and the cost of infrastructural improvement? Is any of that new to your mind?
No, I mean, I think the master planning function was always anticipated. This is arguably the most important project, economic development project in Bloomington for a century, right? So I don't think there was ever any thought that we would try to go about master planning it without outside help. So I think that's pretty much, it did become clear how much that amount would be, what the range of that could look like as time went on. And so this is a reflection of that. And I think it's going to be, hopefully it will fall below that amount unless there's a surprise that pops out at the last minute that we're not aware of. In terms of the remainder, that sort of infrastructure investment, there could be a lot of, things that change there. I mean, so at one extreme, the development community could be leaned upon more aggressively, potentially, to offset some of those costs. At the other extreme, those costs could be in excess of what we're anticipating them to be. So that continuum is pretty wide still right now, and right now we're just kind of throwing something in there just to give you a heads up that that type of expenditure may in fact happen. Broadly, this is what it could look like, but as time goes on, we'll try to get more specific with it.
Oh, it is a little different though, right? Because we were thinking that we were just using a master developer, right? And now we've got a master developer and a master planner, right?
No, the master developer was always, there was never a feeling that so a master developer as a term is you kind of hand the whole thing over to someone and they just do the whole thing.
Sure. But right now we've got we've got two parties involved as opposed to one, correct?
Yes, so potentially. So yes, there would be a master planning function.
Yes.
Which is different than an owner's rep function. Mm-hmm. And the master planner, I think, was always something that we knew would be there. The owner's rep function has evolved over time. Our understanding of what that could look like, even the terminology of it is, and in fact, going through this process of interviewing, which you were part of,
Sure.
we became a lot clearer about what it is that we expect the owner's rep to bring to the table and what we don't expect them to bring to the table. So, for example, doing an analysis, financial analysis of potential development scenarios, it wasn't clear what side of the fence that should fall on early on in our discussions. It's become increasingly clear that that's probably better on the master planning function and less on the owner's rep function. And that really the owner's rep picks up, first of all, make sure that the master plan doesn't go off the rails, right? Because they're going to be keeping an eye on what is the viability of any kind of master plan in terms of marketability to a development community. So their early role is to make sure the thing stays within some level of reasonability. And then long term, they're really selling the heck out of the thing and finding those development partners that can come in. So that's probably less So we would rely on them less to do things like, hey, if you have scenarios A, B, and C, what are the economic implications of each scenario? And that's more of a master planning related function.
Oh, no, I get it. He had asked if anything was different, and that is different in the sense, isn't it? Like
Well, I think there may have been a time when we wondered whether or not we needed an owner's rep, but I think that given the scale of this project, we quickly overcame that. So maybe early on, like in the even in the trades district, right? We realized that we needed outside help. We just don't have the capacity to do these two functions. So.
Can I ask a question? You may have already reviewed this before and I'm not aware. Are there any parameters for the planning or development? Anything that can't be there? Anything that must be there? Or is it still wide open?
So there are two restrictions on that.
Okay.
I mean, one's going to obviously be the UDO,
Right, okay.
the baseline of that. The restriction from IU Health was that it can't be a competitor, I shouldn't say. It can't be a hospital or some sort of without prior written approval of IU Health. And so that kind of limits what that site will be. But otherwise, in terms of this particular document places no limitations specifically, but the purchase agreement did.
To those things?
To those things.
And IU Health also stipulated they would not leave behind the current hospital building.
Exactly, yes.
Right.
And it can't be a hospital, could it be medical offices? Or is that included in the whole definition of?
I honestly I would want to go back and review the agreement
Just
again
curious.
to give you the specific language.
Okay.
But I think it was pretty well restricted past anything that would be considered kind of a direct healthcare provider
Okay,
that might
thank
compete
you.
against IU.
And I think sorry, that's the best I got.
Oh, no.
And the emphasis has always been on affordable housing and building
Yes,
up our housing.
right, and I didn't know if, and I have followed that, I didn't know if there was anything, though, that restricted that and said it couldn't all be affordable housing, or 50% has to be affordable housing, or, just curious, or any of it had to be a school, or,
So there are a couple structures that will, right, the garage. I think the RDC is aware that the garage will stay. So there's a possibility of the old hospital building staying, maybe not. That's still up in the air. And then, of course, which is off property, but there's that old school which is next door to the hospital
Yes.
site. So, of course, that doesn't get touched as part of this. Everything else is kind of on the table, I think, at this point.
I didn't think we owned that.
No, it's off property, right.
More for the record than anything else, could you also talk about the difference between what ULI did for us and what a master planner will do for us? Because that's
what was the first one? The
Urban Land Institute.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry to make you talk more.
No, that's fine, just
Yeah, I
so
mean,
we
I think-
understand the sequence of consultants that we're hiring.
Yeah, so I think fundamentally, I think what's going to happen, and it's going to be really it'll be like the second quarter through the end of the year, right, roughly the timing, is a ULI process on steroids. So ULI came in, they did a week. They did a lot in a week. They interviewed a lot of people, but it was pretty tactical. It was in and out. It was very much, they have a formula, and they applied that formula, and they're in, they're out, and that's it, right?
Boilerplate, really.
Yeah, they had sort of unique ideas, but what I would consider that is sort of the starting point of a much more robust effort, which will engage a much wider swath of the community. It'll have more complex and varied ways of providing input. It'll hopefully yield a much more sophisticated and nuanced set of options for the community. It will not tell us what to do, but it will provide a framework, right, sort of what's possible in the area. Because, of course, this is going to be a 10 to 15 to 20 year build out, and things change. And so you don't want to have a prescribed plan where suddenly the market drops out of the bottom of it, and then you're stuck with a plan that's useless because the market's gone, right? So I think it will yield something that'll be less about little pink boxes and blue boxes and stuff. And it'll have some amount of that, but it'll really be a sort of vision and framework for what could be there with some guidance on how to do it. And then it will fall to, both the owner's rep and all of us to implement.
So a more direct way of asking Sue's question, did we get what we paid for with ULI? Are we a step along the way that we wouldn't have been had we not invested in that project?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to quantify, but I would say yes, because I think what ULI got us was a couple things. One is it got us some continuity from an earlier discussion to refocus the community on this opportunity after it had sort of gotten a little dormant. And so it kind of reactivated the community into the possibilities of what could be there. It brought some of those same people back into the fold that had been part of earlier discussions a couple of years prior. That's tremendously valuable, whether or not it's worth exactly the amount of money that was paid for it. And it also started to lay out very broadly some basic parameters of what kinds of things people would want to see there. All of which I think helps this next phase tremendously, because you're not starting at this point that where last time we talked about it was 2011 or whatever it was. Right?
Question about the $500,000. Just by way of refresher, I know we've worked with master planners before, but what could cause that price to grow up to get larger than that? What does a change order look like for a master planner? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Well, so first of all, that's just a holding number. So you'll get a more specific, I don't know if you're here and you're talking about it, but we'll get a more specific number tied to an exact contract. And that contract will stipulate exactly what is included and what's not. So things that could cause that number to go up would be us adding scope beyond the well-defined scope. And they've been pretty robust in describing what's in, what's out. So if we were to add scope, like in any other situation, we would expect within reason that would increase the time and cost.
And those kinds of revisions would come before this body too, right?
Yeah, because they would be contractual revisions, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions from redevelopment commissioners in regards to resolution 20-09? Any questions from the public in regards to resolution 20-09? None. Can we have a motion?
I move approval of resolution 20-09.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? None. The motion carries. Next item of business is Resolution 20-10, change order approval for the 17th Street reconstruction project. How you doing, man?
Good. Good to see you. Here tonight seeking approval for change orders number 4 and 5 for 17th Street project. Overview of these. We changed the method for subgrade treatment on the road base. So there was a deduction of $44,000 for the method we did not use, but there are an additional cost of close to $100,000 for extra stone and excavation work for the method we did use. There was a handful of reasons why we did this, but the biggest one was we saved several weeks of construction time by changing our method here. And as you recall, last fall we were hopeful of having the road open by Thanksgiving, so the time was very helpful to us. And then I've been here before asking for additional funding for rock excavation. Another little part of that, we had to do some additional forming for some of the footings on the walls because of some issues with that rock, so that was another $20,000. And then there is a side path project that I believe will be constructed later this year that includes a pedestrian crossing at 17th and Crescent. So staff decided to go ahead and build that crossing now while the road is closed versus going back in later this year and closing the road back down. So that's an additional $61,000 for that island. Technically that's part of another project. On change order 5, situations where there was work that had to be done on the water line. Once they uncovered it, they found they could do the work in a different manner that saved us quite a bit of money. So we did that. And then we also would be adding 75 days to the contract because of the utility delays and all the rock excavation that we had last year. Any questions?
Was there any federal funding or anything that, I mean, it's not gonna, I guess my question is, if you had have waited to do the path the island, what was it, 61,000? Would it have cost us less, or would it have cost us the same amount?
I think it would cost us the same, I believe.
Okay.
I'm not the financial guy as far as where the money comes from.
Okay.
I believe that it was all local funded, I believe.
Right?
I'm sorry.
Was it?
Yeah. it is.
Okay. All right.
Well, there's quite a bit of advantage to doing it now while the road is closed instead of reopening it.
Right.
And then dealing with the frustration of people not being able to
Absolutely.
use it while you put in this crosswalk.
On behalf of those of us who represent the district,
We've
yes.
already had our fair share of that, so.
Yeah, I'll
So-
bet.
So are 4 and 5 new, or are we just catching up the paperwork on something that's already been shared with the neighborhood?
Oh, this is,
Does my question make sense?
no, these are all, except for the island, all this has already been done.
Okay. So where are we on completion date now?
Hopefully, mid to April, we will be done. They're out there working right now, doing what they can do, and then when the asphalt plant opens back up, usually around April 1st, they'll finish the paving, and then, we should be done. That's, weather dependent again, but we should be really close in mid-April.
And is that the most recent message we've communicated to the neighborhood? Okay, thanks.
Can I just ask a question on page 1 of 2, change proposal, Reed and Sons Construction, Inc.? I wish I could tell you exactly what page number this is, but the bottom line is $20,437.20. And it says, request for change of scope of work due to a conflict of utilities and over excavation of trench due to rock removal requires a combination of additional forming. Could you just expand on what exactly that means?
Sure. That was on change order number 4, line item 5, the additional forming for the footing. That was originally supposed to be where they were just gonna take a bucket, dig a trench, pour concrete in it. When we had to break all the rock out, that doesn't break out in that nice little square box. So we had to actually go in there and put forms up for that concrete. So it was, additional work that wasn't anticipated to do those footings.
I was just kind of confused about what it meant due to a conflict of utilities. Was there utility issues?
I remember it was all the rock excavation. There were some utilities through there,
Okay.
and they also played into it, but mainly it was because of all the rock excavation.
Okay, thanks.
Any questions from the public in regard to Resolution 20-10? Any questions from redevelopment commissioners?
I'll move adoption of resolution 20-10.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Get her done.
Last item of business is Resolution 20-11, approval of funding for Rogers, Henderson, Winslow Multimodal Path Project. You again. All right.
I had originally presented this to you. He's out sick today, so I will do my best on short notice to hit all the high points here. But we have 3 side paths that are being constructed under one contract. As you mentioned, they have Henderson, Winslow, Rogers. The construction contract amount for these is a little bit over $3.1 million, and the federal funding is covering a little over $2 million of that. So the city's local match that we have to cover is a little bit over $1 million. City of Bloomington Utilities is going to cover about $186,000 of that, and then we're also getting funding from a GO bond for about $243,000. So that leaves us around $645,000 that we're here tonight requesting your approval for.
Should probably note that estimate for consolidated TIF funding is down actually from the original estimate. The original estimate was $689,500, and now it's $644,900. So there was some, once the Department of Transportation gave us all the numbers, that contribution did go down a little bit from TIF funding specifically.
It's okay, you'll find rock, I'm sure. And be right back up.
Thank you for cursing us into
Yeah.
that.
So I remember a lot of this. Okay.
Any questions from the public in regards to Resolution 20-11? Okay. Any questions for members of the Redevelopment Commission? Did we hear that?
That's what I got.
I'll second Sue's motion.
There we
for
go.
This resolution.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. Do we have any more business or general discussion? Anything? Nope.
I have one item to note. Brandon and I had talked about sharing this position. I'm now going to be the designated school board member here, so it will, you'll only get to see me, sorry. No Brandon.
Took one look at us and.
Yeah. He had some work commitments that appeared suddenly.
Okay. All right. So we're going to be seeing you. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Thank you. So if we don't have any other things to talk about, let's adjourn the meeting. Meeting is adjourned.